Good morning. This is Haley Solomon with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Executive Director, Samuel Gunter.
Good morning, everyone. This is Samuel with the Housing Coalition. I am happy to be with you this morning on a gorgeous day, but man, I hope y'all are staying cool out there because it is hot. If you hear any noise in the background on the call this morning, I am home with a sick spouse and a sick child. So she's cutting, trying to make a little thing with construction paper over there, but hopefully we'll be uninterrupted for the next 15 minutes. Let's jump right in. So a couple of things from the coalition front. One, we have begun accepting nominations for our 2023 awards. Each year at our housing conference in the fall at the breakfast, we have recognized organizations and individuals who have gone above and beyond the call of duty to advocate for affordable housing. And traditionally, we've given out people-focused awards, right? Who was the Public Official of the Year, who was Lifetime Achievement Award, things like that. We're shifting it up a little bit this year. So we're going to be giving out awards for work that focused on the work that you do and the advocacy that you engage in. And so there's a link in our call notes. We also sent it out in Housing Matters this week, and we're taking nominations through August 25th. But these are for in-person advocacy events. Things that you do like groundbreakings, ribbon cuttings, where you invite elected officials, grassroots mobilization. Have you tried to bring a bunch of people out to an event or to meet with an elected official? Best digital mobilization efforts, best public education efforts? Have you created resources that really help translate some of the more esoteric financing that is behind some of the affordable housing development into something folks who don't do this for a living can understand? So those are the kind of things that we want to hear from you on, and the work that you're doing to kind of grow this movement. So again, the link for nominations is in the call notes. We are taking nominations through 25th. If your organization or an organization you're connected to has been engaged in some really powerful advocacy efforts, either locally, at the state level, or federally, we want to hear about it and we want to be able to recognize it. So check that out. The other big thing that coming from the coalition, following up on last month's What If analysis, and you can find a link to that in the call notes, the coalition has co-written a full policy brief with the Budget and Tax Center on what impact the dedicated revenue source would have had on the Housing Trust Fund and what it might have in the future, and how it would generate millions more for affordable housing development here in North Carolina. So the brief includes a brief history of the Housing Trust Fund, the tens of millions that have already been missed out on by underfunding it, and the likely impact of creating a dedicated revenue stream. And so you can download the brief. Really excited to put that out. And hope you check it out. Moving on to policy updates. At the federal level, Congress is on August recess, and they're going to reconvene after Labor Day. And if you're interested in learning how you can be advocating for increased federal funding for affordable housing, you can check out NLIHC's August recess toolkit that is linked in the call notes. We've already had one event, in particular yesterday. Congressman Fushi and HUD's Deputy Secretary Agent Podman toured DHIC's Greenfield Place in Chapel Hill and participated in a roundtable discussion regarding the affordable housing landscape and the challenges and opportunities that service providers, developers, and organizations who finance affordable housing are seeing. That discussion highlighted the increased need for additional funding, an opportunity for creativity and flexibility when using funding in order to address the mounting need for affordable housing and housing supports. So there were a number of housing authority directors that showed up to that roundtable. There was NCHFA leadership were there, DHIC staff, HUD field office leadership, and several others, including our policy director, Stephanie Watkins-Cruz. So those are the kind of events that have been happening during the recess around the country, but also here in North Carolina. And those are also an example of some of the things that we want to hear about for our awards as well. On the state legislative front, the House and the Senate are back in Raleigh and have voting sessions on the calendar. We are still expecting to see a budget by the 21st at the earliest. Speaker Moore has indicated that the budget won't become law until September at least. And we know that the House and Senate have agreed on the big ticket items, at least that's what they have indicated. And they are working on the smaller details of the budget and those negotiations right now. So we're still waiting on a budget and still operating as a state without a budget. That's where we're at on that. Some other local updates from around North Carolina. Avery Mitchell and Yancey Wellness Foundation recently celebrated the opening of a 9-unit workforce housing development in Spruce Pine. There's a news release there. Truist recently announced a $15 million investment in the Housing Impact Fund, which is a social impact equity fund that seeks to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing throughout Charlotte. The fund has raised a total of $66.8 million from institutional investors like Truist, Atrium Health, PNC Bank, and Honeywell, and aims to preserve 1,200 units over the next 2 years. The first iteration of that impact fund was formed in 2020 and invested $58 million toward the acquisition of 800 units of naturally occurring affordable housing in opportunity-rich areas across Charlotte. You can read more about that in the call notes. There were some city council meetings this week in Durham and Fayetteville in particular that paved the way for future affordable housing. The Fayetteville City Council unanimously approved funding for 4 affordable housing developments. You can look at those basically allocating ARPA funds and home funds toward a number of developments. The Durham City Council also approved rezonings and annexations for 4 housing developments, including 2 that will contribute to the city's stock of affordable units. There was a rezoning for the development of Fairhaven Walk in the Bragtown neighborhood that'll build 192 affordable apartments with a daycare on site. That's a 4% deal. And the annexation of 61 townhomes to receive water and sewer, 9 of which will be affordable for folks earning no more than 80% of area median income. There's also an article about an ignited conversation around affordable housing at the recent Southport Town Council meeting, saying they found the town is saying it's having a hard time hiring employees and citing high area rents, keeping entry-level workers from being able to obtain housing. Leaders from the Brunswick Habitat and the Brunswick Partnership for Housing advocated at the meeting for the county and local municipalities to increase communication collaboration so they can address the issue collectively. And the Cape Fear COC saw an increase of over 200 people experiencing homelessness in the region between 2022 and 2023. Some other reports and resources that are around there. There's a new toolkit that HUD released called Community Engagement Toolkit, Building Purpose and Participation. It's worth checking out. It's another new resource from Dr. Tiffany Manuel, who, if you remember, was a keynote at one of our conferences 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6. It's called Building the Public and Political Will for Ending Homelessness and Creating Communities Rich with Abundant Housing. If you remember, she was the author of the messaging toolkit that we've talked about quite a bit in past years, taking a look at the types of messaging around housing that works and doesn't work. And some of the corners we back ourselves into when we talk about housing in particular ways. So that's a report I think that is worth checking out. There's also new data, the HUD 2021 Housing Credit Tenant Characteristics. You can look at some key highlights and the full data set linked in our call notes. And also some new research around the institutionalization of landlording, assessing transformations in property ownership since the Great Recession, which I think is definitely worth digesting for folks operating in this particular housing market. Couple of events to highlight. Bipartisan Policy Center is hosting a webinar on the 24th from 1 to 2 called Investing in Opportunity, Rental Assistance in Neighborhoods of Choice. And save the date has gone out for the CAHEC conference next year, which will be held June 4th and 5th at the Raleigh Convention Center again. Last thing I'll mention is just some items in the news. We have a number of links to check out. A couple, there's one on the 30-year clock is running out on affordable housing in the Hill, talking about expiring affordability periods with LIHTC properties. Number of articles on zoning and the housing market. that I think are worth checking out. I'm not going to run through them all, but you can take stock of what's in the news in our call notes. That's what I've got for you today. Only other thing I want to mention again is that we are taking nominations for housing for our awards for the conference. And so if you or someone you know or your organization is engaged in some advocacy efforts, whether it's digital mobilization, grassroots organizing, hosting a big event, creating public education materials around housing, we want to hear about it. We want to be able to highlight and honor that work, and also provide an example for others of, man, this is what's possible if we focus on growing this movement to get the resources and the policies that we need at scale. Thank you for joining us, and as always, we'll see you next week.